Okay, we got a postal truck we need to replace a control arm on. When you're replacing the control arms, there's two different ones. They are different from left and right. The part number, the last two digits will be 65 on this side, 66 on this side. We'll come in here now and show you why we're changing this control arm. You look right up in here, you can see all the rubber's kind of squeezed out on the right and the left. So this control arm needs to be replaced. Of course, first thing you have to do is take the wheel off, and then when you come up in here you can see the control arm, and there's a rubber flap. They call that an inner fender splash guard. Push that back and you can see the two ends of the control arm. First thing to do is loosen the nut on the right side and the left side of the control arm. Don't take them off, just loosen them. And the next thing is to loosen the nut from the ball joint. Next thing is to use your pickle fork and break the ball joint loose. Sometimes you have to hit it a few times. Your ball joint ought to pop right out of the spindle like that. In order to get the nuts off the inside of the control arm, it's best if you use like a long extension with an 18 swivel socket and your air gun. When you come from underneath, your long extension, you get on the back of the control arm bolts. On the inside bolt on this side, because of where it's at in the starter, you can't use an extension, just use a stubby 18 wrench and you can break it loose there. If you don't look first, or if you don't realize it, there are some spacers back there which we'll show you. There's either 3, 4, or 5 on each side. Count them when you take them out and put the same amount back. Spacers are just little U spacers. And again, there'll be 2 or 3 or 4 on each one depending on how it was aligned. Take 4 out from the front, put 4 back. At that point then you're ready to just pop the control arm out of there. Right here is where those spacers go. If you're not thinking about it, when you go pulling this control arm off, those spacers will fly around and flop off and you won't know how many were at each one. This one had 2 in front of the front and 4 in front of the back. So put them back in the same sequence that you took them out. On this control arm, you can see why we're changing it right here. Bushing shot on there. Now a word about these control arms. You can get them mixed up. The right can fit on the left. They will actually bolt up. You won't know anything till you go to drive this thing and it won't steer right. But the difference is, on these control arms you'll see on the back side it's kind of curved, and on the front it's straight. So the straight side goes to the front. If you reverse these, they will, like I said, they will bolt up, but it will still steer crazy. So again, the front side is the straight side. These control arms do not come with a rubber bumper already installed, so you need to install one. Usually if you squirt it down with some type of a lube first. Use your channel locks and pull it up through. Usually if you try and use the old rubber bumper, it just will tear when it comes out, so get another new rubber bumper with it. Put your greaser in the top of the ball joint. Okay, here's a little tip that will save you time trying to get this thing installed again. Put it in a vise and just loosen those outer bolts, nuts. Don't take them completely off. That way when you go to install this, it'll go in position. And then it should rock up and down free like that. Makes it much easier to install it. Take the control arm, slide it back in place. The 2 studs are up there that it will mount to. Just have to jockey it around a little bit to get it in place. And then you need to take your spacers and put them back. Here's another thing, it'll save you a little bit of time. Sometimes them spacers will all just they'll fall apart and fall out of there when you're trying to put them together. You take just a little grease and layer the grease in between each of the spacers. Then they'll stay together when you put them in place. Okay, then you put your nuts on. Okay, at this point we're going to have to raise this spindle up to get it back in the ball joint. If you have a lift like we do, you can use a jack stand. If you don't have a lift, you can do the same thing with a floor jack. It just makes it much easier to be able to raise this up. Guide the ball joint right in the hole. When you jack it up high enough, the ball joint should stick down into the spindle. You put your nut on. Get it tight, you need to insert your cotter pin. Now we took this over to the vise and loosened these nuts. Be sure and tighten them down now. Tighten the front nut down. Then use your stubby wrench and tighten down the back nut. Pull the inner fender skirt flap back out. Grease your joint. Then you're ready for the wheel.
And that is how it's done.